Today I want to talk about how Sam Bankman-Fried accidentally exposed crimes about AMC and was immediately arrested and charged within 12 hours of doing so. I believe this was done to stop Sam from speaking further. So stay tuned and let's make some money. And now I want to dive straight in with the key information. So, the US Attorney General's office tweeted saying that earlier this evening, Bahamian authorities arrested Sam Bankman-Fried at the request of the US government based on a sealed indictment filed by the SDNY. They said, "We expect to move to unseal the indictment in the morning and we'll have more to say at that time." As Biggums tweeted, he said they arrested him one day before court and one day before he was supposed to speak on trial. So he didn't talk and so he didn't blab any further. He asks, did you hear him in that space call tonight? Because it was an absolute mess. And Crystal Ball followed up by saying, remember what I said about Sam Bankman-Fried being the fall guy for Citadel, and so other big players on Wall Street like Goldman Sachs can step in and take over crypto. We know that Goldman Sachs is reportedly looking to take over a ton of crypto firms after the FTX collapse. And now that FTX has collapsed and has disappeared, it effectively protects market makers like Citadel, as FTX was the one harbouring these synthetic tokens. And considering Sam was arrested one day before he was due to attend court, he obviously couldn't testify and blab tons of insider information. But interestingly, as Unusual Whales tweeted, they said breaking news. Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX spoke with Unusual Whales and panelists today, aka yesterday, on Twitter Spaces. They said he seemingly appeared to suggest new uncovered concerns, particularly along wire transfer fraud, tokenized stock fraud, and how money was never properly moved to FTX customer accounts. This is unusual. So obviously in one singular Spaces call yesterday, Sam Bankman-Fried blabbed tons of new information about hidden uncovered frauds. And obviously one of those frauds was around the tokenized securities of AMC and GameStop, and how to the best of his ability, he believes they absolutely were backed one-to-one with actual shares, not specifically real shares, just shares, aka synthetics. One of the questions asked said that money was never properly moved to FTX customer accounts, right? Sam replied by saying the ledger entries were performed properly, but I don't know that any assets were ever moved over. The panelist followed up by saying, so it sounds like to me the answer is probably not, and Sam replied saying that very well may be right. Basically saying that all assets, whether cryptocurrencies or tokenized stocks, were never properly moved around the FTX platform, or never properly purchased or sold from other platforms separately. It was simply ledger entries being debited and credited, and no real shares or no real cryptocurrencies were actually changing hands. And another question asked, in your opinion, does allowing users on all accounts to withdraw funds that may have not been theirs but another customer's constitute a problem? Sam replied by saying, it's a good question, clearly not knowing a proper answer. And obviously as soon as Sam was arrested by these Bahamian authorities, he was charged in the US with wire fraud conspiracy, securities fraud conspiracy, and money laundering, and faces up to 116 years in prison. Sending somebody to prison for 116 years is a surefire way to stop them blabbing insider information and internal secrets about these market makers and hedge funds. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what actually happens to Sam Bankman-Fried. Is he going to be completely let off because of his donations, but might potentially end up blabbing internal insider information about these hedge funds and market makers? Is he going to be in prison for 116 years and potentially never have the chance to speak again, although he may be interviewed internally in prison or may still be forced to testify and end up blabbing those secrets still? Or number 3, likely the most severe of all, is he literally going to be Epstein so that he can never spread any of these insider secrets? At least that way none of his insider information would ever see the light of day. Nobody would know what happened to those tokenized AMC securities, or what happened to the synthetic bitcoins and every other crime that was being committed. But is that potentially unreasonable for somebody that donated tons and tons of money to political parties and seems to have so far gotten away with everything scot-free until this morning when he was arrested? Obviously he was arrested and they believe the US is likely to request his extradition. And Nate Anderson tweeted saying, from the SEC allegations just filed, Sam Bankman-Fried was stealing customer assets from inception, so it was a fraud from the beginning. Now it's really interesting because if the SEC knew that FTX was a fraud from the beginning, why did they wait so long to arrest Sam? Why did they wait so long to do anything about it? And why were they trying to gain regulatory monopoly for FTX? Why was the SEC trying to work with FTX and help them obtain immunity if they knew that they were a fraud from the beginning? And why is Sam only being arrested now, coincidentally, 12 hours after he blabs internal insider information? Also, just a quick one, if you didn't already know, Moon are currently holding their largest ever giveaway for the Christmas period. They're currently holding a $60,000 giveaway sweepstake. You also receive your 20 free shares when you sign up to Moomoo right now using the link in the description below. The indictment says from the inception of FTX, Bankman-Fried diverted FTX customer funds to Alameda, and he continued to do so until FTX's collapse in November of 2022. And it says Bankman-Fried diverted FTX customer funds to Alameda in essentially two ways. Number one, by directing FTX customers to deposit fiat currency into bank accounts controlled by Alameda. And number two, which is the important one, by enabling Alameda to draw down from a virtually limitless line of credit at FTX, which was funded by FTX customer accounts. So Alameda had unlimited access to FTX funds or FTX customer funds from day one. As I said, it's really interesting and really coincidental the SEC have finally decided to take action against Sam the day after he blabs insider information, even though they knew that it was a fraud from the start. And on top of that, Whale Chart tweeted saying, breaking news, Dr. Craig Wright did indeed complete analysis of the spread from the top 45 exchanges, and he determined that more than 29 million bitcoins were for sale. But there's only 19 million bitcoins in existence that have been mined so far, therefore there's at least 10 million synthetic bitcoins trading at any one time. Now this is really interesting for two main reasons. Number one, if there's 10 million synthetic bitcoins, it's very easy to assume that there's tons and tons of synthetic shares. In fact, we know there is because Sam Bankman-Fried admitted it directly. But number two, if there's 10 million synthetic bitcoins between the top 45 exchanges, it means that FTX wasn't the sole problem. Many other exchanges are also selling synthetic bitcoins right at this very second. And therefore many more crypto exchanges are going to collapse over the next few weeks as more is uncovered around these synthetic bitcoins. And obviously, for example, if exchanges like Robinhood are selling synthetic bitcoins, it's very fair to also assume they are absolutely selling synthetic shares like AMC and GameStop. And as Pip and Sammy tweeted, he said, if Sam Bankman-Fried tokenized every AMC share, we've been ripped off. Honestly, we really need Adam Aaron to start speaking about all of this stuff that goes on by others, ripping us out of gains on our stock. He asks, has Adam Aaron seen real evidence yet or not? And I personally believe after Sam Bankman-Fried's admittance yesterday, Adam Aaron now has 100% proof that synthetic shares exist, as Sam Bankman-Fried admitted them himself. Hopefully Adam Aaron can now speak on these tokenized securities and on the AMC synthetics, as Sam Bankman-Fried confirmed they absolutely exist. And on top of that, it seems like Binance may be the next exchange to go under. As Wall Street Silver tweeted, he said, get out while you still can. CZ Binance is eventually going to be charged with money laundering, and the US government doesn't want competitors for their CBDCs. We recently saw over the last 24 hours, the number of Binance withdrawals just hit $1.9 billion. Right now, there's clearly a run on Binance, very similar to the run on FTX that occurred only a few weeks ago. It wouldn't surprise me if over the next 2 to 7 days, Binance also ends up insolvent and experiences the exact same fate as FTX. Obviously, I've warned you many times that buying and holding crypto right now during this current market crash is not a good idea. Obviously, I've been speaking about this market crash since December of last year. As you can see from this chart tweeted by Dylan, he said it's the largest 24-hour flow of Bitcoin out of Binance ever. 39,637 Bitcoins have been withdrawn in the last 24 hours. On top of that, it's also the largest 24-hour flow of stablecoins out of Binance ever as well, at $2.159 billion. On top of that, Dylan also received some DMs about executives at Binance bailing, institutional clients withdrawing their money, and massive charges coming. As I said, I really do believe this will end in Binance going insolvent over the next few days. This is obviously going to crash crypto further and is going to harm these hedge funds as they're going to run out of another liquidity measure. They're going to struggle even more to meet these margin requirements and to meet these margin calls, and will end up being liquidated. I personally think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks with cryptocurrency exchanges and how that impacts the value of cryptocurrency and the value of the market as a whole, and whether the market ends up crashing further. I think it's also going to be really interesting to see exactly what happens to Sam Bankman-Fried over the next few days and the next few weeks, and whether he ends up blabbing internal secrets or whether he's forced to prison or potentially Epsteined. But guys, be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments below. And as always guys, be sure to ding that notification bell, because that way you'll be alerted when I upload a new video. Cheers!